Hi, everybody. This is Jack. Say hi to Jack. He'll come into the story in a little while. An oft-used phrase to describe the docile and complacent population of the Roman Republic as the Roman Empire began was the term bred in circuses. The government would feed people for free and stage huge spectacles to keep the masses distracted, entertained, and generally happy while the movers and shakers decimated and eventually took over the known world population. The population of Rome had become so stagnant that it was said their only remaining cares were entertainment and eating, a populace which no longer cared for birthright, its historical birthright of political involvement. Does this surprise anyone that 2,000 years ago a dominant, conquering republic kept its citizens in line by meeting the basest of their needs? People were too wrapped up in the next big show and what they were eating for dinner to care about much else. The prevailing attitude of a once politically conscious and proud people had become, well, I'm not starving. I'm not being fed to the lions. And hey, shows are free. What do I have to complain about? Meanwhile, the emperor, the governors, the shepherds of the flock were able to do pretty much anything they wanted to do. You know, I think I want to take over Persia today. Yeah, but boss, what will we tell our citizens? Persia hasn't bothered us, so how can we justify this? General, let's just make a huge parade, stage a mock attack depicting these Persians and while we're at it, Israelites too, as evil, greedy persecutors of their own people. When our citizens see that, and then later hear that we've gone to save these poor people who, by the way, they don't eat or have circuses for free, like we do our citizens, they won't bat an eye. If they were even to think about it, which they won't, I'm not worried about it. We can't pull them away from the Colosseum long enough. And even if there are a few, they'll have bought the myth and agree that we should invade for the good of the Persian and Israelite people. See how this works, General? Let me ask you something. Does any of this ring a bell and give you a sense of deja vu? We may not be talking of the simplicity of bread and circus, but the base concept is the same. Let me paint a picture or two for you. In the first scenario, you have a guy. We'll call him Jack. Hey, I forgot. There's Jack right there. That's Jack. Jack's from a lower middle class family. 5 kids. Dad works in a machine shop. Dad's always grumpy. Hardly any extra money for even necessities. Jack grows up and he says, I don't want to live like this forever. I'm not ever going to work in a shop. At 18, he applies for college. His parents, though poor, made just a little too much money for him to get financial aid, so he has to take out loans. While working towards a degree and living at home to save money, poor Jack develops cancer. See, his parents could only afford a house under high-tension power lines, as nobody wanted that land. And now this 20-year-old is dying. He owes over $25,000 in loans. He's not even done with school. He's got just a year left. But He only has a part-time minimum wage job. Because it's part-time, he doesn't have health insurance. He doesn't qualify for it. And you can see where this story's headed. This man, Jack, took a gamble on the system and it failed him. But, that is not my point. That's not the point of the story. Here, let me paint you picture number 2 and see if you can find the common denominator. Sally is a newly divorced 45-year-old. No kids, relatively well off financially. She has a $500,000 mortgage, a brand new Lexus, and a job working 70 plus hours a week. She vowed to be rich one day after growing up poor. She's a self-made woman and works for herself. But Sally's lonely, newly divorced, and no time to meet people. She starts making profiles on different social media sites. Within a few days, Sally has become very popular, and her smartphone is constantly buzzing with notifications. Whenever she's at the store, at the laundromat, walking her dog in her gated community, Sally always has her face in her phone. She walks right by people she could be meeting face to face, only to have relationships with people she thinks she knows. So what is it that these two people, who are different in about every way, have in common? I'll tell you. The modern day bread and circus. These folks are so wrapped up in the minutia of their own pitiful existence that the thought never even crosses their minds that there is a whole world out there. A world that's been set up on purpose to keep the masses sick, in debt, yearning for material wealth to fulfill their happiness, lacking any moral compass, lonely to the point of disillusion, and it just goes on. It's on and on. These are just two fictional people I made up. Sorry, Jack. But look around. Hell, look at yourself. A variation of one thing or another is no farther than your own backyard, I bet. When the people are too distracted by their own problems, just trying to get by, or living in a fake fantasy online reality, tyrants and evil shepherds will do to the people whatever they choose, and with almost no blowback or repercussions. The tangled web of deception is so massive, so finely tuned with all the details worked out, that almost nobody will believe this kind of master manipulation is possible on this scale. The big lie is easier to swallow. Well, if anyone cares to listen anyway. Most people have been trained or conditioned to respond to such outrageous things as these with the following. You're crazy. Or, quit whining, you baby. Nobody said life is fair. Or, I bet you believe in UFOs too, huh? And so forth. People would just rather go on eating their bread and watching their circus. And hey, besides, if it wasn't heard on mainstream media like CNN or Fox, it can't possibly be true. We all know that news programs and journalists and reporters they all have our best interests at heart and would expose such an agenda. You know, since they work for the people, exercising their right to free speech. After all, this, my sick, in debt, lonely, isolated friend, is America, where it's land of the fees and home to your grave. Okay, Jack, let's do the shocker. This Jack is going to say goodbye, and we're going to see what happens to Jack after 30 years of living in this system. Poor Jack, he can't even keep his head up. Come on, Jack. Look, his eyes are dull. His nose is messed up. Well, this is the end for Jack. Let's not end up like Jack.